Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking about transportation planning, and the crystal ball is out on the middle of the table for our discussion. Joining us are two participants in the crystal ball. Andrew Gruber is the Executive Director of the Wasatch Front Regional Council. Bret Millburn, who's on the Regional Council and is a commissioner from Davis County. And you guys just came back from a national conference, didn't you?
We did. We just got back last night from attending the National Association of Regional Councils conference, which is a compilation of metropolitan planning organizations from across the country that get together and discuss transportation-related issues and regionalism and things of that nature.
So has anybody got like anti-gravity cars worked out yet? Did that come into the conversation at this conference at all?
That's a secret. We can't really share that yet.
Well, let's talk about, Rhea covered the history of transportation planning and the fact that nobody thought about planning roads before 1960. There was enough space that when you needed one, you just went out and built it. And hoped that when you got to the city or the county boundary that it lined up with the other one. And so it's come a long way. Let's talk about the legislature really changed how we fund and look and build out these organizations in the last legislative session. We have a unified plan now. How is that changing traffic planning?
Yeah, it's a good question. This is a topic that impacts every Utahn, transportation, how we get around. And, Commissioner Millburn mentioned this national conference we were at. And it's clear as you talk to folks from other regions in the country, just how good things are here in Utah. We have a really strong economy, low unemployment, and our transportation system, for the most part, is working really, really well. But we also know that we're the fastest growing state in the nation. We're going to add about 2 million more people by 2050. So you think about the impact of all of those people traveling around on our transportation systems and the impact on traffic congestion and on air quality and on our quality of life. And so with all that growth that's coming, we've got to make sure that we're all working together collaboratively to invest in our transportation system and provide choices to people for how they get around.
Well, I think that's a really important part is this choice part.
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of talk about forcing people out of their cars, and that seems downright un-American. But if you can make it appealing enough to get out of your car and find a different way to get to work, and it's reliable enough, I think people would voluntarily migrate without necessarily being forced to sell their car and walk everywhere.
I think it actually goes beyond just getting somebody out of their car for getting out of your car's sake. There's so many other aspects that come into play when we're talking transportation planning. It's beyond just the roadway or the trailway or the transit line. It delves into our economic development, or the infrastructure that's put in place helps drive the direction of economic development. And then it goes even beyond that into quality of life, in particular housing, and where people are living and how people want to live anymore is a driving factor in the conversation.
Do you think that as congestion grows, and not all of this growth is going to come to the Wasatch Front that we're anticipating, and I guess it should be pointed that people think of transportation, they usually just think of the Wasatch Front, the I-15 corridor, and all the traffic reports, and you talk to a guy from Garfield and he's afraid of Salt Lake County. But it really is more than that, because traffic congestion is already existing in other parts of the state. How many MOS groups do we have?
So the Metropolitan Planning Organizations, the MPOs, there are 4 of them in Utah. So there's the Wasatch Front Regional Council, and that's in Salt Lake County, Davis, Weyburn, Box Elder. There's the Mountain Land Association of Governments in Utah County, and then there's the Cache Valley MPO and the Dixie Area MPO down in St. George. And so in those areas where there's more population that's concentrated, you've got these organizations that bring together mainly the local elected officials, the county officials and the mayors, to work in conjunction with UDOT and then the transit agencies to figure out what are the most important plans and investments to be made. And as Commissioner Millburn said, we do that and coordinate transportation with where are people going to live, where's the housing growth occurring, where are the jobs springing up, and can we coordinate all of those things together to be as efficient as possible. But as you noted, it's certainly not only an urban issue. There are huge transportation needs in all areas of our state. There may not be as much transit service in the rural areas of the state, but people are typically traveling longer distances. And one of the things that we know all across the state is that we have to be investing to keep our road systems and our transit and trail systems in good shape so that they're safe.
State of good repair.
Yeah,
that's right.
I think there was a statistic in all the stuff that I was looking at as we were preparing for this that you know, there's a $4 to $1 ratio about rehabbing a road with deferred maintenance versus staying on top of it. So you either spend $1 to just keep it in prime shape, or you spend $4 to rehabilitate it, and something like $25 to replace it. Is that about right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
$10 to $25 if you're going to completely redo it. You know, Utah has done a good job of staying ahead of this curve, of investing in our transportation systems. But particularly at the local level, there's challenges for cities and counties to keep up. And so this is a conversation that has to keep happening.
So with the unified plan and the fact that you're now looking at all of the MPOs, I knew I'd get that right, and you're looking at this whole Wasatch Front picture, and you're looking at trying to do bicycles, and you're looking at trying to make sure that you've got pedestrian infrastructure in place, and you're accommodating for new transportation forms as they come along. How do you divide the money? Because to the guys in San Juan County, staying on top of that road or getting that northwest corridor taken care of in Washington County, to those people are going to be as important or more important than the big pressure in Utah County and Salt Lake County. So how does a little guy make sure that his interests are protected when you're prioritizing?
Well, I think you know that's a big challenge, but there are formulas that are put into place on the different revenue streams that are being tapped, particularly the gas tax, and there's a split between what comes to the state and then what goes to the locals, and there's a formula by which that is distributed, and that's being looked at and modified when necessary. There's also a process by application for these funds and certain criteria that needs to be met to fund a project. And I think even more importantly anymore is the willingness and the capacity of even the local level to participate in some of these projects to really move them forward. And that's why things such as Proposition 1 play a vital role in those opportunities to generate some funds that stay locally to help move these projects forward.
The gas tax goes up. People get, they think, oh, greedy government, they're just being wasteful. I don't want my gas taxes to go up. But then they notice it when all of a sudden they're stuck on the freeway for 10 hours.
And the gas tax is a direct user fee. People use the roads, they pay the gas tax, it goes directly back into taking care of the road systems that we have. Another area that we need to keep looking at is public-private partnerships. How can the private sector be involved in investing in our transportation system? And like Commissioner Millburn noted a little bit ago, if we invest in our infrastructure, that helps the economy to function. So if a business is going to be looking at where do they locate, we do a great job bringing businesses in from out of state. Well, they think, how can I locate somewhere where I'm going to have good access to customers, where I'm going to have good access to workers? Well, if we have good transportation systems, that helps the economy thrive and helps businesses thrive. Well, so then there's an incentive for the private sector to be involved in helping to make sure that our transportation system functions well. This is, I think, an area that we're going to be looking at more and more as time goes on.
As you go through this planning process, I know when they first started the planning in the 60s, they were looking at population growth basically on the east and in a couple of pockets to the west. And so all of that transportation started being north and south. And in that first 20-year plan, to the extent that I've looked at it, all of a sudden they had to go back and say, well, now wait a minute. All of a sudden we end up with more east-west needs than we have, and then we got caught short. You know, you do these nice plans and you think, okay, well, people are going to grow here, and then they don't. Then what do you do? I mean, has that happened? Have you guys witnessed that in your time?
I think that's happened, and I think maybe something to consider as a plan is only as good as how it's implemented. And this is where it gets right back to our local communities oftentimes and their zoning and things of that nature. We can have a plan and we can kind of envision where things are going to go, but if at the local level we don't stick to our zoning that allows to growth within that plan structure, then we do get kind of a sprawl and whatnot. So,
and you know, picking up on that, you mentioned, Chad, a few minutes ago, the action that the legislature took. There was a significant change made in the way that we are investing in our transportation system. SB 136, which is Representative Schultz and Senator Harper as the co-sponsors, made a fundamental change to the way we're thinking about transportation. So we've had these plans. Utah is nationally known for having the unified transportation plan that looks out decades into the future. And for the viewers of the show, all the information about the plan is available at unifiedplan.org. But then the question becomes, are the dollars actually following what the plan says? And are the local governments and the private landowners, are they coordinating to move forward and implement the plans? Well, Senate Bill 136, for the first time, says to the state, when the state is making its investments, when UDOT is making its decisions about how to invest millions of dollars all around the state, they need to be thinking about local land use and how that land use coordinates with transportation. They also need to be thinking about economic development. What kind of investments can be made in the urban areas and in the rural areas to bring economic development to our state and coordinate that transportation infrastructure?
So that'd be kind of chicken and an egg thing. I mean, if you know, you're talking about Beaver County, let's take Beaver City. They want economic growth. They need economic growth down there. Mm-hmm. And so as you are doing these long-range plannings, are you doing a chicken and egg thing, saying, well, we've got to improve some of that east-west traffic around the Beaver area so that they can have the kind of economic development that they can exploit the energy possibilities that they have. And so is that going into this kind of planning? Is it that detailed?
absolutely. Yeah, those are the mindsets by which we're all operating. It can't be linear in thinking anymore. And when I say linear, not just the roadway or the transit line or the trail, but just even aspects that come into play here. We've talked about economic development, we've talked about housing, we've talked about other things that all come into play on putting that plan together.
You know, and I agree with this. You say chicken and egg, and it's a great analogy because all of the decisions around transportation, around economic development, housing, air quality, all have to be thought of at the same time. We have to link those decisions. And that's why it's also so important for local communities, including county officials and county staff, city and other, to be really involved in this transportation process. You can't just leave it to the transportation folks. Just like the housing folks have to be involved at the same time, everybody working together, all the stakeholders, to say, what's the vision for our community? How do we want to grow? And then what's the transportation system, the housing mix, to bring in that strong economic development?
Okay, I got one question for you, and a quick answer. How long have you been doing this on transportation?
About the last 12 years.
Okay. How long have you been working on it?
Well, in Utah since 2010, but about 25 years total.
Okay. So in transportation, 20 years ago or 12 years ago, what has surprised you in transportation that you weren't thinking of that happened?
Yeah. Well, there's technology.
Yeah.
Yeah, what blindsided you?
You can never predict accurately what's going to happen with technology, right? And I'll tell you, my teenage son, 16 years old, it used to be a rite of passage to get a driver's license. Now he says, I'm good, Dad, I'll take Uber. He does not really interested in getting a driver's license. It's more convenient for him. So there's more opportunities for people to use technology and have choices for how to get around. And we know that there's so many changes that are coming, but we don't know exactly what those changes are going to be. We've got to try to design our systems to be able to be responsive and take advantage of those innovations.
I think I would agree with Andrew there on the technology aspect and trying to keep pace with it. But I think the other thing that has maybe surprised me somewhat is just how fast our population has grown and the interest in being in Utah and our own internal growth. It's like on hyperspeed.
Yeah, it is. It's at least a 50% growth rate over what we currently have, which is already high. Gentlemen, thank you for taking the time. I hope this opens the window. When we come back to the county seat, we are going to take a look at short-term planning and find out how you participate in it on a daily basis and how they get all that information for those radio broadcasts. We'll be right back on the county seat. Thank you.